The print, 2nd of August 2023, India's semiconductor aspirations are unattainable in China's opinion. It is anticipating New Delhi's failure. China has employed every trick in the book to prevent India from succeeding in its desire for independence from a dominant China. According to the Xinhua News Agency, India is the graveyard of foreign investment. The discriminatory business practices of New Delhi, according to the official Chinese media, should make one skeptical of India's semiconductor ambitions. The U.S. Chips and Science Act and the following Micron agreement, inked immediately before Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi visited the U.S., were cited by the state media as examples of Washington's efforts to restrict China. According to Chinese official media, India's ambition will be hampered by the age-old issues of talent, infrastructure, and the rapidly changing technology ecosystem as the chip war frenzy captures the attention of its politicians, diplomats, and business leaders. The Guancha claimed that India is also known as the graveyard of Chinese enterprises and that IBM, Samsung, Xiaomi, and other companies have received fines for various reasons, almost all tax-related. Even while New Delhi has gradually changed the investment regulatory environment, there has always been a tradition of shielding particular industries from foreign investment. Through targeted invites to foreign corporations to engage in the semiconductor industry, New Delhi is currently attempting to alter the impression of the business environment in India. China makes fun of India and tries to denigrate those it deems less than it. In Gandhinagar, Gujarat, Modi recently launched the second Semicon India event and provided businesses with an unprecedented 50% financial aid for establishing semiconductor manufacturing facilities in India. According to a Guancha report, India oversells its capacity to draw semiconductor companies and falls short of its claims. It stated that although the Modi administration had announced the semiconductor subsidy in 2021, the companies had not yet received the subsidy intended for the semiconductor and display fab ecosystem. Additionally, it was claimed in the article that Indian officials continually announced fresh investment deals with Foxconn even though none of them had developed. Chinese observers urge the Taiwanese enterprise to tend to its fixation on India's market potential. Regarding its investments in India, Chinese political pundit Shamanan remarked, "Foxconn's future lies in the acceptance of one country, two systems in a peaceful and prosperous world, there is no other way." The desire of the Chinese state media to promote semiconductor production in India is a hot topic. The conversations center on Modi's several meetings with Foxconn chairman Young Liu to develop a semiconductor manufacturing base in India and bring a portion of Apple's supply chain there. The state media has made fun of India's capacity to draw a semiconductor company with a supply chain. Additionally, the collapse of the joint venture between Foxconn and Vedanta was used as evidence of India's long-term failure to succeed in luring semiconductor companies. The elephant India has inadequate fundamental strength, and the semiconductor dream is fading away, a user on social media commented. Rajiv Chandrasekhar, the Indian Minister of State for Electronics and Information Technology, was criticized on Chinese social media for his remarks on India's plans to overtake China in the semiconductor industry. "Overblown. Who assured you?" a Chinese user asked. On Chinese social media, Modi's Semicon India conclave was the hashtag Modi claims to establish a semiconductor supply that "who can be more reliable than India" was a trend on Weiboing Washington's attempt at geopolitical balancing motivated. China criticizes India's lack of strength to participate in the semiconductor supply chain. According to reports in Chinese media, the U.S. supports India as the semiconductor supply chain alternative to restrain Beijing's economic expansion. According to critics, the U.S.'s Chips and Science Act is a bid to contain China's technology development and an effort to enlist partners in the scheme. During the U.S. Secretary of Commerce Gina Raimondo's March visit to India, the Chinese state media claimed it supported India because it was concerned about its excessive reliance on Taiwan for semiconductors. The state attempted to create tension between Taiwan and the U.S. by claiming that the U.S. was supporting India. Guancha described Raimondo as saying that Taiwan should be worried about losing its edge in the semiconductor market to India during her visit in March to live meant India's unattainable aspirations and Chinese plans to suffocate India. Despite U.S. assistance, New Delhi has a challenging learning curve. India should learn from China's experience with attempts to produce semiconductors that were tainted by corruption. You won't be able to build a domestic semiconductor supply chain by just pouring money into the issue. Beijing increased its subsidies for semiconductor production during the 2000s, but this hasn't boosted the local industrial base's expansion. Wuhan Hongshin Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, HSMC, a Chinese semiconductor company, is an excellent example of Beijing's turbulent history. It was rumored that the top leadership of HSMC, a semiconductor company that appeared respectable, had intimate ties to the Chinese Communist Party. The business was a partnership between Beijing Guangliang Lanshu Technology and the Dongsa neighborhood in Wuhan. The company's leaders were eventually revealed to be con artists who carried business cards that read TSMC. Vice President Toto gave the idea that they were connected to Taiwan's renowned semiconductor giant, TSMC. The joint venture, which HSMC persuaded the municipal government of Wuhan to fund, was a fraud. Despite receiving money for 3 years, could not make even a single chip. The HSMC story teaches us a few lessons. The inability to recruit the talent necessary to scale semiconductor manufacture has been China's Achilles heel. India will experience the same difficulty in finding the appropriate people to work on manufacturing suitable light yield of semiconductors. Many good, bad, and ugly players will be vying for a share of the current semiconductor subsidies that Modi promised. Indian ambitions in the semiconductor industry face a difficult road ahead, according to the Chinese official media. Setting timelines for India to become a semiconductor hub in 2 years is unreasonable because China will do everything else to slow it down. Lessons learned from the clever, capital-intensive, and driven people of Taiwan. It took Taiwan decades to understand all the nuances of semiconductor supply, and the country still has a long way to go to keep its competitive edge. Taiwan's capacity to rely on the Taiwanese diaspora in the US and other countries was key to its success story. Since then, the diaspora has evolved into the driving force behind an entrepreneurial ecosystem that thrives in the current geopolitical climate. The history of semiconductors is as much a tale of the people as it is one of science and money. To achieve total independence, New Delhi is attempting to attract India's somewhat outdated 40 nanometers semiconductor production. New Delhi intends to explore reaching the higher nodes of the semiconductor supply chain but only implicitly admits this. India will ipso facto be self-reliant in semiconductor production, declared S. Jaishankar, External Affairs Minister. He is cautious about the geopolitical implications of technology, which tempers his enthusiasm for semiconductors. Until and unless the enterprise ecosystem struggles to control its niche to maintain its advantage, India's Goldilocks political science moment might only persist for a short period. China undoubtedly wants to see India's attempt to enter the semiconductor supply chain fail. Beijing's perception that the UN intends support India against China by supporting New Delhi's economic growth has only been strengthened by Micron Technology's investment plan in India. As Beijing sees Modi's eagerness for a chip war as a component of Washington's containment policy, it won't ever to thwart India's plans for the semiconductor industry.